She gave her last $10 to a man she didn't know at the train station, unaware he was a rich person who would later return to alter her life. The train station was almost empty, covered in the gray mist of a cold March rain. Puddles formed in the cracks of the platform, and the sky seemed to push down harder with each passing moment. Emily pulled her jacket tighter around her thin body, her fingers red from the cold. The job interview she was going to felt like a tiny thread of hope, but it was all she had left. Her eyes quickly looked at the schedule board, then at the wrinkled ticket in her hand. She had just enough time. Then came the sound of a voice. "Excuse me." The words were soft, unsure. She turned, surprised. A man stood just a few feet away, rain soaking into the shoulders of his thin coat. His beard was long, his hair stuck to his forehead, and his eyes, blue, tired, almost sorry, looked straight into hers. "I'm sorry," he said again, shivering. I had my wallet stolen. I just need $10 for a ticket home. I promise I'll pay you back if you can trust me, please." Emily blinked. For a moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the far-off hum of a coming train and the steady drop of rain on the metal roof. $10. That was all she had left. In her pocket was a single crumpled bill, the very last after paying for her ticket and a cup of instant coffee. $10 she was saving for a small meal after the interview. $10 stood between her and complete nothingness. She could walk away. She should walk away. But she didn't. Instead, she took a closer look at him. His lips were shaking, his hands red from cold. But it wasn't just how he looked. It was something in his eyes. There was no anger, no trickery, just tiredness, sadness, maybe even a bit of shame. Emily paused, her fingers around the bill in her coat pocket. "Do you have anyone you can call?" she asked. He shook his head. "Phone's dead. I tried asking others. No one wanted to talk." "And how do I know you're not lying?" she pushed, careful. "You don't," he admitted. "But I promise. I just want to get home." She should have left. But something inside her, perhaps something that still held on to the person she was before her mother died, before everything fell apart, whispered, "Help him." Without a word, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the bill. Her hand hung in the air for a moment, her heart beating fast. This was crazy, totally illogical. She looked at him again, then slowly held out her hand. "I don't know why," she said quietly, "but I believe you." He stared at her hand as if unsure it was real. Then he reached out almost gently and took the bill. "I promise I'll pay you back," he said, his voice shaky. Emily managed a small smile. "Just get home safe." He opened his mouth as if to say more, but then the train pulled in, making a soft sound as it stopped. The man nodded, turned quickly, and vanished into the crowd getting on the train. In seconds, he was gone. Emily stood still, the damp wind blowing past her face. Her stomach felt uneasy with doubt. That was it, her last $10 gone. She didn't even know his name. The loudspeaker announced the next departure. She checked the time again. Her train was next, her chance, maybe her last. She got on, water dripping from her coat sleeves, and sat down in a window seat. The rain blurred the glass as the platform disappeared behind her. She didn't know it yet, but that simple act of kindness, giving away her last $10, was the moment her life began to shift. The morning after the train ride, Emily stood outside the office building where her interview was planned. Her heart pounded, and her hair was still wet from the light rain. Her stomach growled, empty. She had skipped breakfast, not by choice, but because her wallet now held nothing but old receipts and an old photo of her mother. She was 20 minutes late. The bus needed exact change, and she had none. She'd tried walking, going through streets she didn't know, but the city was huge, uncaring. By the time she got there, the receptionist gave her a tight, sympathetic smile. "I'm sorry, the interviewer had another meeting. You'll have to reschedule," Emily tried to explain. She even offered to wait, but the woman had already turned back to her computer. Emily walked out of the building, her shoulders drooping, wet socks squishing in her shoes. The wind cut through her coat like paper. For a long time, she just stood there on the sidewalk, watching the people who passed, busy, warm, dry, a world that moved forward with or without her. By the time she made it back to her small rented room, a single bed, shared bathroom, and flickering hallway light, the landlord was waiting outside her door. "Rent was due 3 days ago, Emily." "I know, I'm trying to—" "You said that last week. I can't keep making exceptions. Just give me until Friday. I've got someone else who will take the room tomorrow. I'm sorry." She didn't argue. What would be the point? She packed the few things she had into a worn backpack: 2 changes of clothes, a cracked phone with no service, a dog-eared paperback her mother used to read to her. She didn't cry. Not yet. That night, she found a corner in the 24-hour public library downtown. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled like dust and old coffee, and the security guard gave her a tired look when she curled up in a chair behind the nonfiction shelves. The next night, he asked her to leave. The benches in the park weren't soft. They were metal and cold and harsh. But the stars above were quiet, and the city, in its strange way, became silent after midnight. She hugged her backpack to her chest and tried to vanish. Each day blended into the next. She looked for work, but had no address to list, no phone number to be reached at. She spent her days walking between libraries, shelters, and job centers. The word hope started to feel like a cruel joke. And yet sometimes, in the middle of those long, hungry afternoons, she would remember his face, the man at the train station, his voice, his eyes. That moment he had looked at her like she was the first person who had truly seen him. And for a second, she would wonder, had she been foolish? Was it silly to give away her last $10? She had nothing now, not a dollar, not a place to sleep, no plan, no family. And still, there was a strange kind of calm that lived quietly inside that memory. She had helped someone, maybe even saved someone. She had done the right thing, not because she had to, but because something inside her told her it mattered. But that calm was small, and the cold was great. One rainy evening, as she sat on the edge of a park bench trying to dry her socks with the last of the sunlight, a group of teenagers passed by. One of them threw an empty soda can in her direction and laughed. "Get a job," he mumbled under his breath. She didn't look up. That night she went back to the library, but the doors were locked. It was a holiday. She walked the streets until almost midnight, then curled up in a bus shelter, protected from the wind, but not the fear. That was the night she cried. Not loudly, not with sobs, but with silent tears that ran down her cheeks and disappeared into the collar of her coat. She missed her mother's voice, her laugh, her warmth. She missed feeling safe, feeling known. Her stomach was empty, but the emptiness in her chest hurt more. When the sun rose the next morning, it found her still there. Eyes swollen, hair messy, heart bruised. She had hit rock bottom. There was nowhere lower to go, and still she was breathing. It was a Tuesday morning when Emily met her. The park was unusually quiet, with only the occasional runner moving through the mist that still clung to the grass. Emily sat on her usual bench near the statue of a forgotten general, her knees pulled to her chest, her coat zipped all the way up, though it did little to block the cold that now lived in her bones. She hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. The ache in her stomach was dull, but constant. She'd gotten used to it, like the steady hum of a bad memory you can't quite stop. Then she saw the woman. She was old, maybe in her 70s, but her movements were smooth. A wool shawl was draped over her shoulders, and in her gloved hands was a small brown paper bag. She walked with purpose, but when she got near the bench, she stopped and looked at Emily. "You look hungry," the woman said softly. Emily blinked, unsure if she was being pitied or judged. "I'm fine," she murmured automatically. The woman smiled, kind and gentle, and sat down beside her. She placed the paper bag on the bench between them and opened it slowly. "I bring extra every morning in case I meet someone who might need it." Inside was a sandwich, thick slices of bread, a little uneven, but fresh with ham and cheese and a bit of mustard. Emily stared at it. "I can't take that," she whispered. "Why not?" the woman asked. "Is your pride bigger than your hunger?" Emily looked away, feeling ashamed. The woman waited quietly, patiently. Finally, Emily took the sandwich. Her hands shook as she unwrapped it. The first bite made her eyes sting. "Thank you," she said, barely getting the words out through the lump in her throat. The woman nodded. "There's a soup kitchen on Monroe Street, just a few blocks from here. They serve lunch, but they're always short on help. You look like someone who could use a warm place and a reason." Emily looked at her. "You think they'd let me help?" "Ask for Carol," the woman said, standing. "Tell her Ruth sent you." Then she walked away. Emily stared after her for a long time, then looked down at the half-eaten sandwich in her lap. Later that day, she found the soup kitchen. The building was plain, a faded brick outside with a peeling sign that read, "Hope Table." Inside, the smell of vegetable soup and baked bread welcomed her like an old friend. She asked for Carol. Carol turned out to be a practical woman in her 50s, with rolled-up sleeves and a clipboard that seemed always in her hand. When Emily explained that Ruth had sent her, Carol's face softened. "Ruth has an eye for people who need a second chance," she said. "You willing to work?" Emily nodded quickly. "Then grab an apron." The first few hours were a rush of tasks, cutting vegetables, wiping down tables, pouring soup into chipped bowls. Emily's hands worked without thinking, but her mind was awake. People came in, men and women of all ages, worn down by life, but still managing smiles, still saying thank you. One man told jokes while he waited for his meal. Another offered to help sweep after eating. A little girl with messy hair handed Emily a drawing made from crayon and torn notebook paper. It was of a flower. By the end of the day, Emily's feet hurt, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like herself again. Over the next few days, she kept coming back, not for food, though they always offered, but to help. She peeled potatoes, folded napkins, and learned the names of the regular visitors. She listened to stories that were full of pain, but also of strength, of people who had lost everything and still showed up every day with hope in their eyes. One evening, after the last dish was dry, Carol handed her a small envelope. "Just a little payment," she said. "You've earned it." Emily opened it. Inside, $20. Enough for a bus pass, maybe a few days of safety. But more than the money, it was the trust, the recognition, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't invisible. She sat outside on the curb, watching the sun set behind the rooftops, turning the sky into shades of orange and gold. And in that moment, for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel like she was falling anymore. She was still poor, still unsure, still alone in many ways. But she had found something, a small piece of light in the dark, and she held on to it with everything she had. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon at the soup kitchen. The lunch rush had just ended, and the air still held the scent of tomato stew and warm cornbread. Emily was wiping down the last of the tables, humming softly to herself, when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up. A man had stepped inside. He wore a dark, well-made coat, the kind you didn't often see in this part of town. His shoes were shiny, his hair neatly brushed back. But it wasn't the clothes that caught her attention. It was his face. Her heart skipped a beat. There was something about his eyes, blue, calm, and strangely familiar. He looked around the room, not like someone lost, but like someone searching. And when his gaze landed on her, he froze just for a second. Then his lips parted in the slightest smile. Emily set the cloth down slowly, staring. It couldn't be, but it was. He walked toward her with steady steps, stopping just a few feet away. "Hello," he said, his voice warm, more sure than she remembered. Emily blinked. "Do I know you?" He tilted his head, that same small smile still on his lips. "You do," he said. "Or at least you once trusted me when no one else would." And just like that, it made sense. The train station, the rain, the $10 bill. "You," her voice was barely a whisper. He nodded. "I was a mess that day, wet, cold, and desperate. You gave me your last $10. Emily's mind raced. She looked at him again, really looked. The rough stranger was gone. In his place stood someone neat, composed, like he belonged in a business meeting, not a soup kitchen. "I never got your name," she said softly. "David," he replied. "David Carter." She repeated the name silently, as if trying to keep herself grounded. "I came back the next day," he continued. "But you were gone. I checked the station, the ticket counter. No one knew who you were." I didn't think I'd ever see you again," she admitted. He smiled again, softer this time. Neither did I, but I never forgot your face. Emily folded her arms across her apron, still shocked. Why are you here? I was passing through the area and saw the sign. Thought I'd stop in. Something told me I should. She wasn't sure she believed that. No one just walked into a soup kitchen in this part of town by chance. Not dressed like that. David looked around the room. You work here? I volunteer, she said. Helps me stay afloat. He nodded thoughtfully. You helped me when I had nothing. I'd like to return the favor. She shook her head slowly. That's not why I gave you the money. I know, he said. That's exactly why I want to. There was a long silence. Then he stepped closer, reaching into his coat. He pulled out his wallet, then hesitated. I brought this, he said, handing her a new $10 bill, to pay you back. Emily stared at it, then laughed softly, not in a teasing way, just with disbelief. She took the bill, her fingers touching his. Thank you, she said. He wasn't done. And more than that, he added, I'd like to take you to dinner sometime, or coffee at least. There's something about you I haven't forgotten. Emily looked down at the bill in her hand, then back at him. Everything about this moment felt unreal, impossible, like a scene from someone else's life. You're really not who I thought you were, she murmured. He smiled. No, I'm not. And suddenly she realized something. Neither was she. They sat across from each other in a quiet part of a nearby cafe, the kind with different chairs and soft jazz music playing. Emily still wore her soup kitchen apron beneath her coat, and her hands curled around the warm mug David had ordered for her, chamomile tea with honey. She hadn't had anything this comforting in weeks. David stirred his coffee slowly, then looked at her. You're probably wondering who I really am. She gave a small smile. Well, yes. He reached into his coat and pulled out a sleek black business card. He slid it across the table. Emily hesitated, then picked it up. David Carter, CEO, NovaSpark Technologies, founder, the Carter Foundation. She stared at it, blinking. NovaSpark? That's your company? David nodded. I started it 10 years ago. We make smart learning programs and AI tools for education. It grew faster than I ever imagined. Emily's mouth opened, then closed again. She had heard of NovaSpark. Everyone had. It had been on the news, praised for making digital learning available in schools with little money. She remembered reading about it once, back when she still had a job and a couch to read on. But that day at the station, you were doing something silly, he finished with a grin. I'd been working on a project for our charity branch, the Carter Foundation. One of our goals is to understand homelessness and build better ways to support people who get left behind. I wanted to see for myself, truly see it. So I went undercover for a week. No wallet, no ID, just the clothes on my back. He leaned forward slightly. I planned everything, except getting my pocket picked on the first day. Emily laughed softly. So you were truly stuck? I was. And everyone I approached either ignored me or pushed me away. He looked at her, his expression growing softer. Everyone except you. She felt a blush rise to her cheeks. You didn't know who I was. You didn't ask for anything in return. You gave me everything you had and then you just disappeared. That stayed with me. Emily looked down at the tea. I wasn't trying to make an impact. Honestly, I thought I was being foolish. You weren't, he said firmly. You were human. You were kind. He paused for a moment, picking his words carefully. I've met people with money, power, and influence, but in that moment, you showed more honesty than most of them ever will. That's why I've been looking for you. I want to offer you something, if you're open to it. Emily lifted her eyes. What kind of something? David leaned back in his chair, his voice steady. I want you to work with us. Not at NovaSpark. At the Foundation. We have programs that help people like you once were. Young, struggling, unnoticed. We fund local projects, small business startups, social ideas, and we need people with heart. People who understand. She blinked, shocked. But I don't have a degree. I don't even have a steady address. He smiled. We've hired people with high business degrees and people who've lived in tents. What matters is your past, your strength, your willingness to help others when you had nothing yourself. Emily sat back in her chair, overwhelmed. The weight of the past few weeks suddenly hit her. All the nights on benches, the hunger, the rejection, and now this. "You really mean it?" she whispered. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." She swallowed hard. "What would I do?" "You'd start by learning, training. We'll get you settled somewhere safe with support. Then you'd work with one of our local teams, help shape programs, eventually maybe even lead one." For a long moment, Emily said nothing. The room seemed to vanish, leaving just the warmth of the tea in her hands and the quiet hope rising in her chest. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Say yes," he said with a small, hopeful smile. "Let's change lives, starting with yours." She looked at him, at the stranger she'd once helped without knowing a thing about him, and now sitting before her like a door she never thought would open. And somewhere deep inside, something began to shift. A belief that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't meant to stay lost. She took a breath. "Okay," she said. And in that moment, her life began to shift. Emily's first day at the Carter Foundation felt like stepping into a different world, one she had only seen through glass before. The main office was inside a renewed brick warehouse filled with light, laughter, and the energy of teamwork. Young people moved busily between desks and whiteboards, and walls were covered with stories, photos, and quotes from lives changed by the Foundation's work. David introduced her to the team not as someone to be helped, but as someone bringing value. That alone changed everything. He didn't treat her like a charity case. He treated her like an equal, like someone with understanding the world needed. Over the following weeks, Emily focused completely on training. She learned about community planning, writing for grants, designing social projects. She followed coordinators in the field, met with youth shelters, food banks, recovery centers. Slowly, the pieces of her confidence, long hidden under doubt and tiredness, began to come back together. And then came the moment David handed her a thin folder. "Your own first project," he said. "Design something important to you. We'll support it." Emily opened the folder and saw her proposal had already been written. A mobile soup kitchen, a van that could move between areas with little service, bringing hot meals and human connection directly to those in need, just like she had once been. The idea had come to her during one of her last shifts at Hope Table. She'd remembered the nights sleeping on benches, the shame of walking into fixed shelters, the fear of being seen. But what if help could come to them instead? David believed in it. So did the board. The Carter Foundation funded the first model. They gave her a small team and they gave her trust. The first time she saw the finished van, painted sky blue with Open Hands Project, written in soft letters across the side, she stood in the parking lot and cried. Her first night running the van, she drove to a park she knew too well, where she had once slept beneath a broken statue. That evening, she served over 100 meals. But more than food, she offered stories, hugs, names remembered. She listened. And as word spread, her program grew. In the quiet moments between planning routes and chopping vegetables, Emily found herself seeing David differently. Not just as the man from the train station or the CEO who had changed her life, but as someone with a quiet, steady kindness. He never bragged, never reminded her of her past. He just showed up with encouragement, with humor, with coffee when she was too tired to speak. Their connection grew deeper in soft, unsaid ways. A late walk after a community event, a shared laugh over some burned cookies at the test kitchen. He listened like few ever had. She trusted him without even noticing she did. One Saturday afternoon, as Emily finished a community lunch event, she saw a familiar figure seated on a bench beneath the trees. It was Ruth, the elderly woman who had given her a sandwich on one of her hardest days. Emily rushed over. "I've thought about you every day since. You saved me." Ruth smiled gently. "All I did was feed a hungry girl." They sat together, catching up like long-lost friends do. And then Ruth chuckled, patting Emily's hand. "I hoped you'd find your way to David." Emily blinked. "Wait, you know him?" "I should," Ruth said with a playful glint in her eye. "He's my son." The world tilted slightly. "You sent me to Carol. You knew exactly what you were doing?" Ruth nodded. "David told me about the girl who gave him $10 when he had nothing. I had to meet her. When I did, I saw what he saw. someone with a heart too big to be ignored. Emily sat back stunned. All this time? It's funny, isn't it? Ruth said, how one small act of kindness can grow into something bigger than either of you ever imagined. That night, Emily sat beside David on the foundation's rooftop garden, the city lights flickering below like distant stars. She told him everything about Ruth, about the sandwich, about the moment she realized their paths had been connected long before either of them knew. David listened, then reached for her hand. I used to think fate was just chance we gave meaning to, he said. But meeting you, it changed that. Emily looked at him, really looked, and for the first time let herself believe in something bigger. That maybe her suffering had not been for nothing. That maybe every sleepless night, every loss, every tear had carried her here, to purpose, to love, to a future. And in that moment, everything connected. The rain-soaked train station, the sandwich in the park, the soup kitchen, the blue van rolling through forgotten streets. It had all been leading to this, to her becoming. The city was busy with the energy of early spring when David brought it up. They were walking through a community garden in the heart of downtown where the Open Hands Project had recently teamed up with a local shelter to provide meals and job training. Children laughed as they chased each other between rows of growing vegetables. Volunteers chatted over wheelbarrows of soil. David had been quiet all afternoon, a certain thoughtfulness in his eyes. As they reached the far corner of the garden beneath the arching branches of a budding magnolia tree, he finally spoke. Emily, I've been offered a new chance, he said gently. We're opening a satellite office in New York. The foundation is growing, and they want someone to lead the city outreach program. She looked at him, her heart stopping in mid-beat. You? He nodded. They asked me to take it, but I told them I wouldn't go without making you the same offer. Her breath caught. You want me to go with you? I do, he said. To help lead the next step of Open Hands. We'd be able to reach more people, build on everything you've started together. Emily didn't answer right away. She looked around the garden, the people, the sun setting just behind the rooftops. Her gaze fell on a young woman helping an elderly man sort seed packets. Someone Emily had met during her second week volunteering when she herself was still unsure of where she belonged. This place, this city, it had held her through the worst of her life. It had watched her fall and then taught her how to rise. I don't know, she said finally. I love what we're building here. These people, they were the first to believe in me, to make space for me. David nodded, not with disappointment, but understanding. I thought you might feel that way. I'm not saying no, she added quickly. I feel like I'm supposed to keep growing roots here a little longer. There's still work to do. I know, he smiled, his voice soft. That's why I admire you. They sat on a bench nearby, letting the quiet fill the space between their thoughts. I guess this is the part where the road splits, Emily said. Maybe, David replied, but only by location. She turned to him, her eyes searching. You think we can make that work? I think we already have, he said. You and me. We're not just tied by place. We're tied by what we believe in, what we've been through, and we'll keep building in different cities perhaps, but always together in some way. She smiled, a little sad but deeply sure. You're going to do amazing things there. So are you, he said. Here. They made a plan. David would move to New York in the fall. Emily would continue running the Open Hands Project in the city they both loved. They'd stay connected through weekly calls, shared projects, visits, and late-night messages filled with updates and dreams. Their story wasn't ending. It was simply changing. And as they stood beneath the blooming tree, the wind lifting petals into the air around them, Emily knew one thing with complete clarity. She wasn't losing him. They were just planting seeds in different ground. 1 year later, the city had changed, or maybe Emily had changed the way she saw it. The streets no longer felt like a confusing path of sadness. They were filled with purpose, chances, hope. The Open Hands Project had grown into something far bigger than she ever imagined. With more roots, a network of helpers, and a rotating kitchen team, the mobile units now served over 2,000 meals a week. But it wasn't just food they offered. It was dignity, talks, human connection. The national news had found out about the program, and last month she'd flown to Washington, D.C. to accept an award on behalf of the team. a national honor for new ideas in community help. As she stood at the podium, lights flashing and cameras clicking, she remembered the bench she once called home, the sandwich from a stranger, the $10 she thought she'd lost forever. Now she was the director of a full homeless support center, a place with showers, job training, mental health services, and art therapy rooms. The same hands that had once shaken with fear now carried keys to a place where people could start again. And still, every morning, she started her day just like before, at the kitchen, tying on an apron, greeting the early guests by name. On the anniversary of the center's opening, the team organized a celebration. There were balloons, a banner that read, "1 year of open hands," and dozens of photos strung on a clothesline showing moments of meals shared, lives changed, smiles earned. Emily arrived late, having met with city officials about increasing their grant support. She stepped into the hall, her heart full, her eyes looking around the room. Then she saw him, David. He was standing by the serving table, holding a bouquet of wildflowers and something else in his pocket. His eyes locked onto hers, and suddenly the noise of the room faded away. He crossed the room slowly, smiling. He looked older, wiser, and more at ease than she had ever seen him. "Hi," he said softly. She laughed through the sudden burn of tears. "You came back?" "I told you I would." The room quieted, as if sensing something more than a simple reunion. David reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. But before opening it, he also pulled out a crisp $10 bill, unfolded, untouched. "I've been carrying this with me," he said, "for a year. Not because I needed to pay you back, but because I needed to remember the moment that changed everything." He opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. "You gave me something no amount of money could buy. Belief. When I had nothing to show for myself. Let me spend the rest of my life proving you were right." The room held its breath. Emily stared at him, unable to speak. The tears fell freely now, and she didn't try to stop them. She thought of the girl she had been, lost, tired, holding a crumpled bill in the rain. She thought of the man she had trusted, not knowing he'd become the one to rebuild her world. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." The applause broke out around them, but Emily didn't hear it. All she could feel was the warmth of his hand in hers, the beat of her heart, and the quiet truth that had carried her all this way. Later, as they stood beneath the string lights, watching the people they had helped dance and laugh and find joy again, Emily held the $10 bill in her hands one last time. She smiled. "A little kindness," she said aloud, "can be the start of a miracle." Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey of hope, kindness, and fresh starts. Emily's story is a strong reminder that even the smallest act of compassion, a single $10 bill, can spread through time and change lives in ways we never imagine. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more real-life tales that inspire, heal, and awaken the spirit. We believe in the power of storytelling to bring light to the darkest places, and you being here means the world to us. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and remember, your story matters too.